Pitter patter, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first edition to the Davis Duo Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the guys that go for two Sports Network. I am your host, Ruspin, joined with the other host, Kev. Kev, say hello to our adoring fans.
Yeah, me and Ross are just so excited for the fantasy season to get started here that we're up and rolling for this podcast.
I love it. I love it. Kevin, how many days away are we from Fantasy Football Draft Day?
56 days away from this recording.
56 days is close. We're recording 56 days away. Hopefully you guys get this 56 to 55 days away. So by the time the information we're talking about is not too irrelevant. Guys, today we're just doing a quick little off-season NFC recap. We're going to kind of hit every division, talk about the off-season moves they had, briefly touch on the rookies that they drafted, touch to see the kind of impact this has. At the end of the episode, we're going to rank our favorite NFC offenses in the division, and then we're going to turn that around and just rank our entire favorite NFC offense in general. So, Kev, let's just go ahead and start in the NFC East and work our way west. Let's start with last year's NFC East champions, the Washington football team. Few key moves they made this offseason. They added Curtis Samuel, the wide receiver slash running back out of the Carolina Panthers. He had as a free agent. He was on Ron Rivera's team in the past. They also added Ryan Fitzmagic at quarterback. I think those are really the two biggest fantasy impacts. Kev, what do you think the biggest impact with Ryan Fitzmagic is?
Yeah, I'm looking at Scary Terry right off the bat. I mean, with Alex Smith last year, I just think Scary Terry with Fitzmagic can be even better. So I'm looking forward to that in fantasy. And then just Gibson's second year. I don't see Curtis Samuel making a huge impact on that team.
I was about to ask that. So Curtis Samuel last year ended the year with about 500 rushing yards. Antonio Gibson last year fought for carries. I mean, not really fought for carries. Antonio Gibson was the lead back in Washington, but he did get carries taken away by Peyton Barber, and he had receptions taken away by J.D. McKissick. Do you think Curtis Samuel is just going to slide in that wide receiver 2 role for the Washington football team? Or do you
Yeah, I would
think
say wide receiver two role for sure in that instance. And I think Gibson then gets more of the carries and has a big year too.
do you even think a guy like Curtis Samuel is draftable? I mean,
16th, 17th round
just
flyer.
super late flyer. I agree. I don't think. I mean, Curtis Samuel's 4 years in the league, and he hasn't made a huge impact anywhere he goes yet. Right? Usually, I mean, if I'm an Antonio Gibson owner, whether it's keeper, dynasty, whatever it is, I am not threatened by Curtis Samuel. So, Kev, we got all those guys in the second round, those running backs in the second round, right? We got Gibson, Akers, Mixon. Those are probably the three. Najee Harris. We'll throw those four guys in there.
hmm
Of those four guys, where do you rank Antonio Gibson?
Probably right behind Cam Akers. I'd go Cam Akers, Gibson, Najee, and then Joe Mixon. Najee and Joe Mixon probably have the biggest risk associated with them. I think Gibson and Cam Akers are solidified in that backfield, though.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I always like to get those running backs on the second year jump as well. The sophomore year jump is always big. That's big with
Mhm.
wide receivers too. How big of an impact? So we talked about Ryan Fitzmagic. Ryan Fitzmagic has never really had a good fantasy football running back. Granted, the teams that Ryan Fitzpatrick have been on have been like the Jets, the Dolphins when they had Adam Gase as their play caller. He was also on the Buffalo Bills for a number of years. So granted, he doesn't really have the opportunity. But do you think that cuts into Antonio Gibson? I mean, last year when Alex Smith was the quarterback, it was painfully obvious that Alex Smith could not throw the ball downfield. So, we already touched on the Terry McLaurin, but do you think that that might hurt Antonio Gibson? Or do you think it's just going to help him more? Just because they're not going to be so dependent on the run as they were with Alex Smith.
Yeah, I think with Ron Rivera, it'll be pretty split. It should be a pretty good solidified offense there on throwing and running the ball there. We know Fitzmagic is just a straight up gunslinger, but when it
Absolutely.
comes to Ron Rivera's play calling, I think they'll run it equally.
And also, that defense is super exciting. That defense is so good that Ryan Fitzmagic could have 3 turnovers a game, and they could still be in the game at the end of the game. So I think that's pretty exciting. Okay, so that's enough on the Washington football team. I almost called them the Washington R words. We don't want to do that. Let's move to the team. I think there's a ton of fantasy players being drafted early in the draft. Let's talk about the Dallas Cowboys. This offseason, they didn't make a ton of moves. Their biggest move, though, was probably giving Dak Prescott the bag. They drafted Mika Fitzpatrick in the first round. They're obviously focusing on their defense because their defense and injuries were their biggest problems last year. Kev, how excited are you about the Dallas Cowboys? For me, I honestly, outside of Zeke and Dak, I don't know if I'm going to touch this team. I think Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, and Michael Gallup. I could see okay, that's not true. I don't hold Michael Gallup to the same level as those other two guys. I don't want to touch Amari Cooper or CeeDee Lamb because I have no idea who's going to be the number one wide receiver. And the difference between 1,200 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns and 1,000 receiving yards is 4 touchdowns is massive in fantasy. What do you think about those wide receivers there in Dallas?
Yeah, I think when it comes to wide receivers at their ADP right now, I don't want to be drafting either of those guys. Being on the Dallas Cowboys, they're just way too high for my taste between CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper. Amari
So,
Cooper's going at pick 39 right now, so you're wasting a third round pick on him.
so who are some other wide receivers that are getting drafted around 30? Do you have the ADP list in front of you?
Yep. So at 39, we have Amari Cooper. At 40, we have Julio Jones. At 41, we have Adam Thielen. And at 36, right before him, we have Mike Evans and Allen Robinson. I'll take Allen Robinson and Mike Evans earlier than I would take, Amari Cooper right at that same draft pick. And then when we go down to CeeDee Lamb, we also have David Montgomery. We have Kyle Pitts. We have Chris Godwin. We just have so many guys there that I'd rather have.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I don't know. Amari Cooper scares me. I mean, so I went, as you know, I'm an Alabama boy, right? To all our fans that don't know, I went to Alabama, so spoiler. So I love to cheer for Alabama players in the NFL, and Amari Cooper kind of scares the crap out of me because I can see a scenario that, honestly, in my mind, Amari Cooper is either going to be a top 5 wide receiver or a top 20 wide receiver. And I don't love that at a third round ADP. Give me Julio Jones every day of the week over Amari Cooper. And what about Dak's leg injury? So Dak had that horrific leg injury. Tony Romo called it a cramp on national television. If you watch the replay, his ankle was definitely not cramping. He's back. He says he's completely healthy. Do you have any hesitations with him leading this offense?
I don't have a hesitation with Dak just because there's so many weapons around Dallas. I am, like we said before, I'm not touching the wide receivers as much at their ADP. Probably not touching Zeke with Tony Pollard kind of going off at the end of season there. But Dak Prescott is a guy that's going to command that offense and probably have a pretty solid fantasy season. I'd give him a top 3 quarterback edge.
So you're not touching Zeke. I think that's interesting. What do you mean? Why aren't you touching Zeke? I understand Tony Pollard had a good end of the year, but don't you think the O line being hurt and Dak being hurt and Zeke kind of just fumbling early in the year? I mean, I almost view last year's Dallas season as a complete fluke. Throw it away, get rid of the video because it's just irrelevant because everyone was hurt, right? They had 3 of their 5 starters on the offensive line those final 3 years, I believe, or 3 games, I believe. So does that do you? I mean, obviously you don't feel the same way. Why don't you feel the same way as I do?
With Zeke, I just know that there's problems more than the fluke season. He's fumbling the ball a lot more in the last 2 seasons combined. You look at his last 3 seasons, he's regressed each one. He has a big contract. It's not a contract year at all for him. He's got guaranteed money. And then also, we always forget who the head coach is out there. They got an awful head coach, personal opinion coming from a Packers fan, but a guy who just doesn't want to run the ball. When Zeke and Dak were healthy, Dak was throwing for 500 yards a game and 5 touchdowns, and they didn't run.
So I think a factor of that though is they were down so much because their defense was so bad,
And
and
it'll be
they
bad again this year.
yeah, but I don't know if I mean they added Keanu Neal at safety. Trevon Diggs is going to have another year. They added Micah Parsons, so I thought was incredible. If it wasn't for COVID, so Micah Parsons set out a year at Penn State because of COVID. If it wasn't for COVID, Micah Parsons probably would have been the first defender drafted, and he slipped to like 11 to Dallas. So I think that's pretty good. I I don't know if I'm sitting top 5. I think Zeke is 100% a top 5 running back. Give me CMC, Zeke, Kamara, Henry, Cook. That'd probably be my top 5 right now. Let's not compare our top 5s. That's not what this episode is. I view Zeke as a top 5. I think it's interesting that you don't. Obviously, we're allowed to have our own opinions. I think that's enough with the Dallas Cowboys. Let's go ahead and let's move over a little bit. Let's go to the Philadelphia Eagles. I think the Philadelphia Eagles are a huge question mark. They said sayonara to Carson Wentz. They said hello to Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts, in his 4 games last year that he started at the end of the year, I am not including that 5th game because they intentionally lost that game to get a higher pick. Jalen Hurts was on pace for over 1,000 rushing yards and over 4,500 passing yards. Everyone is goo for Jalen Hurts. What do you think, Kev? I mean, the big offseason moves, they obviously drafted Devontae Smith. I think their offensive line is going to be healthy again. What do you think overall, Kev? I kind of touched on the Jalen Hurts mania that's kind of going on this offseason. In your mind, do you think Jalen Hurts can live up to his high draft position right now? I mean, if we were to look at his ADP right now, he's being drafted in the, oh, come on. He's pick 105 right now. So that's pretty high. QB 11. He's being drafted around Ryan Tannehill and another QB he's being drafted close to, if I could search this a little bit better, would be, help me out here, Kevin Tanner. You're doing great, Kevin. And Joe
Okay.
Burrow. So Joe Burrow, Ryan Tannehill, and Jalen Hurts are all the guys being drafted on the same ADP. Kevin, what do you think of Jalen Hurts so far to start the season?
I mean, he's a quarterback. Quarterbacks in fantasy are pretty irrelevant when it comes to it. If you're playing under an 8-man league or a 10-man league, you don't waste your time with those quarterbacks and wasting a pick around there.
I guess, unless he throws for 4,500 yards and 1,000 rushing yards. If he has 1,000 rushing yards, that could be like running back 12, and he's your quarterback, plus 4,500 passing yards. Don't you think that's a huge value?
There is a huge value. The huge value is going to come in if he is the 10th quarterback off the board, that you can wait because every other team has a quarterback, and you can scoop up Jalen Hurts way later because people have that position locked up. I think that's where the value comes in with him. Where the value decreased for me on the Eagles offense, Jalen Hurts is a running guy. We've seen it the early years of Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. He's kind of eased up on the run a little bit. But Miles Sanders is going to take a big hit, I think, this year, especially with them drafting a rookie running back in Kenneth Gainwell. I don't think he's going to be a huge indicator, but that is maybe some goal line carries that get taken away from Miles Sanders as well.
Also, the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles came out this offseason and says he doesn't really believe in bell cow running backs. I mean, what the hell is that? I love bell cow running backs for fantasy. So, yeah, I mean, where would you draft Miles Sanders while we're on that conversation? His ADP right now is running back 16, pick 23, running back 16. He's being drafted around guys, DeAndre Swift, DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, Justin Jefferson are the guys that's around him. What do you think of that ADP?
Yeah, with Miles Sanders, he's definitely got to be a second, third round guy. I think he's going around the DeAndre Swift, Josh Jacobs, those question mark running backs. If you only locked up one running back in the first 2 rounds, you should definitely lock up Miles Sanders. But if he's the first running back on your team, you're going to be in trouble.
Right. I agree. So Miles Sanders, the third round running backs are all such boom or bust characters, right? There's DeAndre Swift, there's Miles Sanders, J.K. Dobbins, and Josh Jacobs. Outside looking in, it's either bad offenses or one-dimensional running backs, right? Running backs that aren't catching the ball and they only run the ball. That's in Josh Jacobs and J.K. Dobbins, and then question marks with bad offenses is Miles Sanders and DeAndre Swift, right? DeAndre Swift is in the Detroit Lions. I think they're a terrible offense. We'll get to them later in the episode. Miles Sanders, coming out and saying he's not a bell cow. Jalen Hurts only played 4 games last year. Devontae Smith being the wide receiver 1 there. Jalen Reagor being there. I don't love the Philadelphia Eagles offense. I will say, though, if it's the 12th round and Jalen Hurts is still sitting there, that's a super attractive quarterback pick, late flyer. I don't think guys in our league would love him as opposed to guys in other leagues. So I think that's an interesting stat. Let's touch on the last team, Kevin. I think we're going to have a ton of conversation about this team. It's the New York Giants. Off season, Kenny Golladay was added. I love Kenny Golladay. I think he's an outstanding, super talented wide receiver. They add an offensive lineman, and Saquon Barkley is also coming back healthy this year. Kevin, I know you got a lot of things to say about Saquon Barkley. What's your immediate thoughts with him coming back from his ACL injury?
Yeah, I think Saquon Barkley will solidify himself back in the top 5 of running backs. He's not an injury-prone guy. He's definitely a guy who slides in between the tackles and gets touchdowns when needed. I think Saquon Barkley with that upgraded O line, and then a big indicator that a lot of people don't think about here is Evan Ingram also coming back and maybe playing a full season adds a lot to that team. Those dump off passes for Daniel Jones definitely open up the run game a little bit for Saquon.
All right, so Saquon Barkley's been out. I granted it's still July. Training camp hasn't started, but Saquon Barkley has come out and he's not putting a timetable on his return. Do you think that's more of a, oh, I don't want to tell you guys because it's none of your business, just kind of messing with the reporters, or do you actually think it's the fact that they don't have a timetable that's a big question mark right now?
I think when it comes to training camp, you'll actually see where he's at. Again, just a benefit of having a later fantasy football draft. But also, when it starts back in training camp, they just probably don't want as many questions around why isn't he getting the reps. But they're not going to put him out there in the pads and have him taking hits all of training camp probably until like a preseason game, maybe the third preseason game this year since there's no fourth. But I think it's more of just giving the media what they want to hear now, so there's no questions later. But he'll be ready to roll week 1.
So, we kind of touched. So, in my mind, there are three types of running backs that I super duper really want when it comes to fantasy. There are guys that dominate touches, even though they're on bad offenses. And I think Saquon Barkley would fall into that category. There's guys that catch the ball and run the ball. There's guys that are touchdown and running the ball machines, a Derrick Henry, a J.K. Dobbins, a Josh Jacobs, are those kind of three running backs that they don't catch the ball a lot, but they run the ball, 25 times a game, get 1,000 yards and a touchdown and 10 touchdowns in a season. I think Saquon Barkley is arguably the most talented running back in the NFL. I think his size, his strength, his speed, his everything is just so impressive when it comes to just raw talent. I don't think I, I I'm a little hesitant when it comes to drafting Saquon Barkley just because he's coming off an injury. And as of right now, they're not telling what's going on with it. I mean, it could all be smoke and mirrors. It could be him saying, "Oh, I just don't want to talk about it." But I don't know. The Giants could potentially be so bad this year. I mean, do you think the Giants will win 7 games this year?
Yeah, I don't think they're winning 7 games, but let me tell you about the running back thing that you were talking about. There's a few running backs in this league that when you're out, you're not watching the games and you're just checking your little ESPN fantasy cast and you're watching that line move. Saquon Barkley is just one of those running backs that's getting the ball every play and you're just watching your point total slowly go
True.
up
That
each
is
and
true.
every time. So that's what excites me about Saquon.
So So with his injury, with the offensive line questions, with Daniel Jones being his starting quarterback, what is the earliest you would draft Saquon Barkley, and what is the latest you would draft Saquon Barkley? And I'll answer the same question. But I'm interested to see this because I know. So I know in our league, the first round's pretty wide open. I think as of right now, the only player that we know is being kept in the first round is Dalvin Cook. So I think everybody else is pretty open. Everyone's gonna be looking at Saquon Barkley, right? I mean, the first pick of the first overall pick is gonna go CMC. Second and third, a combination of Henry and whoever else, right? So it doesn't really matter. But Saquon Barkley, starting at, your third pick, Saquon Barkley is going to be there. And I think there's going to be a ton of questions after that. So, in your mind, obviously, you don't have to tell us if you're going to draft Saquon Barkley, but, what's the earliest you draft Saquon and what's the latest you would draft Saquon?
Yeah, if you're 3 or later in the first round, you got to be looking at Saquon or at least be in conversation. I think Christian McCaffrey, Delvin Cook are top 2 picks. But if you're later in the first round, you got to be thinking Saquon, you got to be thinking Alvin Kamara, you got to be thinking Derrick Henry, and pull your draw towards those 3 guys. Those are definitely the next 3 picks with Ezekiel Elliott. Again, I've already expressed my frustration with him. He'd be a little later after those 3.
So would you rather have Jonathan Taylor or Ezekiel Elliott?
Ezekiel Elliott over Jonathan, though.
I'm sorry, not Ezekiel Elliott. I meant Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley or Jonathan Taylor?
I'd rather have Saquon over Jonathan Taylor for sure.
See, here, this is my thought. So I'm drafting 8th overall in our league this year. 10-man keeper league, half point PPR. I'm drafting 8th overall. If Barkley is sitting there at 8, I probably don't want him. I don't think Saquon Barkley is worth a top 10 pick. Kev, I agree with everything that you said. I, I'm just so hesitant with his ACL injury. And I know everyone's going to say, but Ross, Adrian Peterson came back. That's great. I don't think I'm spending my first round draft pick on Saquon Barkley. And the only reason why is God forbid Saquon Barkley sits out the first 2 weeks. If you wasted your first round pick on Saquon Barkley and he's out the first 2 weeks, there's a 0% chance you're winning that first 2 weeks. And I think starting the whole 0-2 is just a terrible thing. I wouldn't draft Saquon Barkley in the first round. Then again, I'm sitting there at 12. As Saquon Barkley's there at 12, I'm obviously doing front flips, but I digress. Let's move on. So actually, that's not true. Let's not move on. Let's rank our favorite offenses in the NFC East. Kev, who's your number one offense in the NFC East in terms of fantasy players? If you look at your roster, you want more of these players on your roster as opposed to other teams. What are those teams?
Yeah, I know I was shit talking the Dallas Cowboys earlier with their current ADP, but if those guys are falling in later rounds, that's going to be the offense I'm most excited about. We know that offense is at least going to move. Behind them, I would definitely have the Washington football team. Just with Fitzmagic, going to make that offense move a little bit more. They got a lot of young players in their second year. And then I'd probably head over to the Eagles with Jalen Hurts. Just exciting again what he can do on the football field. And then the Giants probably coming in fourth. They're going to be the worst team in the NFC East this year, I think. The only player that I'm really excited about would be Saquon, but again, you're wasting your first round pick on him. Besides that, I don't think Daniel Jones can throw the ball that well, so I think the other players are kind of irrelevant.
So, Kev, for me, I agree with your first two. I would swap the Giants and the Eagles just because if I was to look at my roster, I would rather have the Giants wide receiver one. I'd rather have the Giants wide receiver one. I'd rather have the Giants tight end, and I would rather have the Giants running back over the Eagles wide receiver one, tight end, and running back. So that's the only reason I'm going to go with the New York Giants over the Philadelphia Eagles for teams. Kev, let's move into the NFC East next. The NFC East is the Saints, Tampa Bay Buccaneers with Tom Brady. Hate that guy. The Atlanta Falcons rise up. Carolina Panthers. Kevin, which team do you want to start with in the NFC? I'm sorry, that's the NFC South. I said the
Yeah,
NFC
we're,
East.
we're gonna we're gonna make a audible on that and go to the NFC South with the Tampa
NFC
Bay
South.
Buccaneers.
Right. What do you want to start with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Kev?
Yeah, let's do it.
Here's the biggest offseason change between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They won the Super Bowl. Tom Brady said, Bruce Arians, let's keep this team together. And that's exactly what they did. They're keeping every single player on that Super Bowl team on the roster again. One big change is OJ Howard, the tight end out of Alabama, physical freak, huge human being, is coming back from an ACL injury he suffered last training camp. I think that adds an interesting wrinkle in the fold. Kev, what do you think about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
Yeah, I think these are with the whole team coming back. There's not too much discussion, I guess we have to have here. The player that I'd be most excited for would be Mike Evans. I mean, just fantasy consistency gold right
Right.
there with Mike Evans.
First player in all of NFL history in his first 7 seasons to have 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns in every single season. That's just incredible. That's an incredible stat. Mike Evans is on his way to the Hall of Fame. Tom Brady's the GOAT. I hate the fact that my Falcons are in this division because that's immediately 2 losses. Let's not spend too much time on the Buccaneers. We all know about the Buccaneers. Let's shift our focus to the Saints. I think the Saints are interesting. Drew Brees, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, officially retires. The Saints are now handing the reins over to either Taysom Hill or Jameis Winston. We don't know which one yet. Kevin, in your mind, first question is who do you think's going to win? Second question is what impact does that have on the team? I want to hear what you think, and then I'll give my take on this.
Yeah, Jameis Winston's the guy who's going to win that competition. Taysom Hill is very dynamic, good guy to put in, when you're trying to throw off the opposing defense. But Jameis Winston, we forget how good and how big of a gunslinger that guy truly is. And with the weapons on that team, it's going to be hard for Jameis Winston to lose that job.
I agree. I think, excuse me, I think Jameis Winston is going to do everything arm talent-wise that Drew Brees couldn't do these past 2 seasons, right? Drew Brees couldn't really throw the ball downfield. He lacked that arm strength. Jameis Winston's a gunslinger. Jameis Winston is the first quarterback in NFL history to lead the NFL in passing yards, passing touchdowns, and passing interceptions all in the same season. He threw for 5,000 yards, 30 touchdowns, and 30 interceptions in 1 year. That is a crazy stat line. If I'm the Saints, I want Jameis Winston to start. I think Taysom Hill's cute. He's gimmicky. He's not a starting quarterback. If Jameis Winston starts, Kevin, is Michael Thomas ADP in the third round the steal of the draft?
Yeah, Michael Thomas is definitely a steal. Again, we'll find out more in training camp, and I believe Michael Thomas ADP will go up here. But if Jameis Winston is the starting quarterback, I'm not only looking at Michael Thomas, I'm probably moving some focus over to Tre'Quan Smith as a late round flyer.
I read an article this morning, Kevin, saying Tre'Quan Smith has spent the summer with Jameis Winston training in the offseason to be that wide receiver number 2. I think Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara are obviously going to command a lot of defensive attention. And then we got Tre'Quan Smith running like an in route, 15 yards. Boom, that's 2 points on your fantasy team. I like that take, Kevin. I was reading the same article as you were. Great minds think alike. Let's switch over to the Carolina Panthers. Big offseason for the Carolina Panthers this offseason. They added their defense through free agency and through the draft. They drafted J.C. Horn, I believe it was 8th overall, cornerback out of South Carolina. Guys at Jamoke. Let's not get into that. Big offseason moves for them, though. They added Sam Darnold at quarterback. Interesting move to go along with Sam Darnold, though. So they traded that second-round pick to the New York Jets for Sam Darnold, and then they didn't extend him, and then they drafted a different quarterback. So I think that's kind of telltale that they don't think Sam Darnold might not be the solution. I think that's interesting. They lost Curtis Samuel. Kevin, Sam Darnold being added, Christian McCaffrey coming back from injury. What do you think the fantasy impacts are? Obviously, Christian McCaffrey is the 1-1 running back superstar. We don't need to spend too much time talking about him, but let's spend a little time talking about Sam Darnold. I'm intrigued by Sam Darnold. What do you think about him and his impact?
Yeah, Sam Darnold won't have an impact on this team.
You don't think so? You don't think he's any good?
No, I don't think he's the answer here. I mean, you saw all their offseason moves. It just solidifies Christian McCaffrey as that number 1 pick for me overall in fantasy. But I think a guy who could benefit maybe just from the play style that they're going to run, it's going to be run the ball, and then a dump off pass on 3rd and 4. That guy's going to be DJ Moore for me. So if there's going to be a wide receiver to draft here, it'll be DJ.
So I don't know. I kind of like Sam Darnold. I mean, Sam Darnold's probably not being drafted in most fantasy cases. And I don't know if I love him for fantasy purposes. He might not be a good fantasy starting quarterback. But also, let's look at the Adam Gase argument, right? So this will be Sam Darnold's first time not playing under Adam Gase. Last quarterback who went from playing under Adam Gase with no weapons to a new team with a lot of weapons was Ryan Tannehill. And now Ryan Tannehill is probably a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. I mean, I could see Sam Darnold having that huge change. I think Sam Darnold is talented enough. I think Sam Darnold's young enough. Sam Darnold was drafted when he was 20, right? So, I mean, Sam Darnold's super young already. And then he's also going to a team that he had a lot of chemistry with Robbie Anderson when Robbie Anderson and him were in the New York Giants together. I think it's interesting. I think what you said with DJ Moore is true. Do you think there's a scenario where DJ Moore is top 3 in receptions this year in the NFL?
I think there's definitely an instance for that. DJ Moore in PPR is the guy I want. If you're not running a PPR league, Robbie Anderson's the guy that you want. Talking about that chemistry with Sam Darnold, that deep route guy, Robbie Anderson's going to score 8 to 10 touchdowns this year.
Right. I think with Christian McCaffrey being back and hopefully healthy, we don't want to ever see injuries with fantasy. It makes fantasy boring. It stinks when there's a lot of injuries. I think Christian McCaffrey and DJ Moore being the underneath short route running the ball guys, I think the deep ball is going to be wide open for Robbie Anderson, kind of what you touched on. So I'm intrigued to see that. I think Robbie Anderson some weeks is a flex against some bad defenses, hoping for that 40-yard touchdown bomb kind of deal. All right, that's enough on the Carolina Panthers. Let's move to Ross's hometown team. Let's talk about the Atlanta Falcons. Biggest offseason moves. New head coach Dan Quinn is gone. Arthur Smith is in. Arthur Smith was the old offensive coordinator for the Tennessee Titans. Obviously, the Tennessee Titans had a lot of fantasy success for a lot of years. I think that'll be interesting for fantasy impact. Julio Jones also gone. Calvin Ridley, this is your show now. Todd Gurley is gone. We're bringing in Kyle Pitts. We're bringing in Mike Davis. This is an interesting team. A lot of moving pieces. Kevin, what's your first initial thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, whenever you have these big time players all on one team, and the defense has been the weak point for the Atlanta Falcons for a lot of years now, it might get a little bit better, but I'm excited about owning a piece of this offense in fantasy. If there's an Atlanta Falcons player that drops to me, I'm probably picking him up. You know, there's going to be an impact there. I think Mike Davis is a good flex play this year. I think Calvin Ridley could be wide receiver 1 overall this year. Russell Gage even excites me as a flex player. And then Kyle Pitts, we all have seen what he's done in college. He could be a top 5 tight end as a rookie this year.
So do you like Kyle Pitts at his ADP? Do you feel like it's too high? I feel like it's a little bit too high, but I want to hear your opinion first, and then I'll give my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, fourth round, late fourth round is where you're looking at Kyle Pitts right now, which is just too high for me. We don't usually see rookie tight ends take off. I'm not saying it's not possible, but if you go around earlier, you're getting, George Kittle, you're getting Warren Dollar or
Darren
Waller.
Waller.
Yeah, you're getting him. Those are two guys who have solidified themselves in the offense. Those are two guys that I'm picking probably around earlier even to lock up tight end than just a fourth round Kyle Pitts.
So, so my thing with Kyle Pitts is where he's being drafted right now is his ceiling, right? Like, it's just this assumption that because Julio Jones is gone and because they spent the fourth overall pick, that they're gonna force feed the ball to Kyle Pitts, which they might. I don't know, but kind of like you said, I think Calvin really could be wide receiver 1, no brainer. He was wide receiver 3 last year. I think he's only going to get better. Matt Ryan's incredible. Matt Ryan was 30 in the NFL in passing yards last year, right? So I mean, he still got it. I think Arthur Smith is an excellent coach. I think this team's really exciting. So here's the thing. I would rather have Andrews, Waller, Kittle, Kelsey than Kyle Pitts, right? But his ADP scares me to death. So here are some players being drafted around Kyle Pitts: Deebo Samuel, Mike Davis, Jerry Jeudy, Tyler Boyd, DJ Shark, right? So those are the players being drafted around Kyle Pitts. Give me Jerry Jeudy in the sophomore breakout, right? Give me that starting running back in Mike Davis. There's no competition in the running back room with Mike Davis right now. I mean, the other running back is an undrafted free agent, and the third running back is running backs who couldn't beat out Todd Gurley, Ito Smith last year, and they were both terrible. So that's interesting. I don't know. The Falcons offense, I mean, I love the Falcons. The Falcons are going to be terrible this year. Their defense is going to be literally so bad. So that means the offense is going to be out there a lot. That means it's going to be passing the ball a lot. I like the prospect of Matt Ryan. If you can get Kyle Pitts in that 6th, 7th round, I think that's great value. I think it's a great pick. And then Calvin Ridley, I don't think there's too soon to draft Calvin Ridley. That's not true. Top 5 and above is too soon for Calvin Ridley. Anything else after that, it's not too soon for Calvin Ridley because I think that's how good Calvin Ridley is going to be this year. Kev, I'm going to rank the NFC South offenses real quick. So I kind of got some hot takes with this NFC South offenses. So hear me out here. So number 1 is not the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's the New Orleans Saints. And I'll get into that. So the reason I picked that is because I would rather have Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas on my team than any other player in this division. So because of that, I'm putting the New Orleans Saints 1. Number 2, I'm then going to go the Atlanta Falcons before I put the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And the reason why is because the Atlanta Falcons have defined number 1s at their roles. Number 1 wide receiver is Calvin Ridley. Number 1 tight end is Kyle Pitts. Number 1 running back is Mike Davis. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you don't know who's going to get it that day. There's too many mouths to feed. There's too many wide receivers. Antonio Brown, Chris Godwin, and Mike Evans. You could have an 18-point game from those guys, or you could have a 4-point game from those guys. So give me a Calvin Ridley over any of those guys. Give me a Michael Thomas over any of those guys. So then third, I'd go Tampa Bay. And then 4th, I'd go Carolina. What do you think about that ranking? We're probably going to have massively different opinions on this.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. This is fantasy football. This isn't real life football.
Right.
You want the
Right.
people who are going to score points.
Right.
My rankings are pretty similar to yours. We'd start with the Atlanta Falcons. Again, yeah, they have just so many players that excite me. I'd even take Matt Ryan as my late round quarterback.
Sure.
Then number 2, we're coming in with the New Orleans Saints with Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas. I mean, there's just, we talked about Traquan Smith even. Then number 3, we're going to go Tampa Bay when you're looking for a consistent player, consistency is king in fantasy football. Tampa Bay is always a good fallback if you don't get one of those early round guys where the Falcons and Saints players are going to go. And then in fourth, it's got to be Carolina. While they have Christian McCaffrey, if you don't have the first round pick this year, you're not looking at Carolina players.
Agreed. I agree. Yeah. I mean, DJ Moore, when would you take a flyer on DJ Moore? Third round, fourth round?
Honestly, probably even a little bit later than that.
Right. Okay. I don't disagree with you on that. Yeah, let's pick up the pace a little bit. I've been recording for 40 minutes. We've only gotten to two divisions. Good conversation, though. I'm kind of loving it. Let's move to the NFC North. Let's go ahead. That starts with the Green Bay Packers, Minnesota Vikings, Detroit Lions, Chicago Bears. Kev, you're a diehard Green Bay Packers fan. I'll give you the floor first. Let's talk about the Green Bay Packers for a hot sec.
Yeah, we'll just be quick on the whole Aaron Rodgers situation. Nobody knows. Media's making up some stuff. Nobody really knows what's going on with that situation. If Aaron Rodgers plays, I'm excited about Devontae Adams, obviously, first round pick. I'd be pretty excited about Amari Rodgers, the rookie there. If Aaron Rodgers doesn't play, though, player that I'm looking for is going to be A.J. Dillon. They're going to run the ball a lot more if Aaron Rodgers is not playing this season, and they're going to look for a guy who can punch it on the goal line. Look for A.J. Dillon. He's going to be my sleeper this year with Rodgers not playing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see a scenario where Aaron Rodgers doesn't play. I think he's too competitive. I think he was too close last year, and he realizes he's right there. It's so hard to repeat in any sport. It's especially hard to repeat in a Super Bowl, and that's partly why teams never do it, right? So I think if you're Aaron Rodgers, you're thinking about that. I don't see a scenario where Aaron Rodgers isn't playing. Give me Aaron Jones in the first round. Give me Devontae Adams in the first round. And if Aaron Rodgers is slipping with ADP, give me Aaron Rodgers at his current ADP. I love that prospect. I think Rodgers is going to play. I'll roster AJ Dillon just because AJ Dillon's probably the best handcuff in the whole entire fantasy football. In case if Aaron Jones goes down with injury, Aaron Dillon could be a top 5 running back, right? So let's shift the focus. Chicago Bears, big offseason moves there. Re-signed Allen Robinson. Got rid of a lot of key players on defense. They got rid of Kyle Fuller. That's a big hit. And then they added Justin Fields, the rookie out of Ohio State. Matt Nagy's already come out and said Andy Dalton's our starter. How long do you think that lasts, Kevin?
2 weeks tops. Allen Robinson's got to be higher than his ADP right now for that instance. That's why I'm looking at Allen Robinson on this offense. I'm also looking at David Montgomery. There's been some news about Tariq Cohen just not being ready for the season. We saw David Montgomery break out last year. And if Tariq Cohen isn't good to go the first 2 weeks and Montgomery takes it again like he finished the season, I'm looking at this offense. I'm looking Montgomery. I'm looking Allen Robinson.
So here's the problem with the David Montgomery is that their first game of the year is against the LA Rams. And then their third game of the year is against the Cleveland Browns. So granted, they got the Bengals in between then. So if you draft David Montgomery in that third round, he might get you 3 points week 1. Might give you 20 points week 2, and then might give you 3 points again week 3. So that's my only hesitation with David Montgomery. You do have to look at strength of schedule, I think, when you're looking at these running backs super early in the draft. I think there's some running backs that it doesn't matter who or when or where they're playing. I don't think David Montgomery is one of those running backs. I think David Montgomery only had his breakout last year after his schedule got super, super easy. Like there was a stretch where David Montgomery played the 30th, 32nd, 26th, and 28th ranked run defenses in a 4-week stretch. Obviously exploded them. I'm still a little hesitant on David Montgomery. But I agree. Allen Robinson, I think Allen Robinson, the moon is having a number 1 wide receiver as talented as Allen Robinson is crazy. And I'll even give a flyer to Cole Kmet late in the draft. I think second year tight end. He's a big physical guy. He was just at that tight end new thing, getting swole with George Kittle. They spent a second round draft pick on this tight end. Last year he showed some flashes. I really think this offseason they're going to spend a lot of time together. I think Justin Fields might even be the starter week 1. We'll see how that plays out. Shifting gears, let's talk about the Minnesota Vikings. Not a lot of changes on the offense this year, which is interesting with the Minnesota Vikings. Maybe they thought they were good enough. They had Justin Jefferson come in last year, light up the world. They got Adam Thielen. He's getting a little older, but man, he still scores those touchdowns. And of course, the best running back in the NFL, some are saying, Dalvin Cook. Kevin, obviously Dalvin Cook is a top 2 running back in the draft. Let's not spend too much time talking about him. I want to talk about Justin Jefferson a little bit here. Justin Jefferson had such an incredible rookie season. It was insane. Everyone's drafting him super high again. Are you hesitating at all looking at Justin Jefferson? Do you think he can maybe decrease what he did last year, or do you think he's still going to go strong?
No, I think he hasn't even reached his ceiling yet, or even come close to that matter. I think Justin Jefferson is at a great value even for his ADP right now. He could be the wide receiver one at the end of this year. I've said that with a few guys on this list, but Justin Jefferson, you don't see a rookie season quite like that in fantasy football terms. Justin Jefferson is definitely a guy worth going after and maybe even drafting a little bit earlier than his ADP right now.
So here's the real kick about Justin Jefferson. I think Justin Jefferson has really changed the perspective on rookie wide receivers. Here is a stat for you that I want to give to the rest of the league and other guys listening about rookie wide receivers. In the history of the NFL draft, and we started tracing these fantasy footballs and ADPs and things like that, of rookie wide receivers that finished in the top 24, there are three of them. It's Calvin Johnson, Julio Jones, and Justin Jefferson. So I think that's an insane stat, right? We're putting Justin Jefferson and Julio Jones and Calvin Johnson, talking points. So that's crazy to me. I agree with you. I think Justin Jefferson's an absolute superstar in the NFL. I think Kirk Cousins might throw him the ball every time, just cause, right? I don't think there's not going to be a defense that can stop Justin Jefferson. I think his ADP, get him high, get him early. Love having him on your roster. Um, so
Let's
then,
put this in perspective. Justin Jefferson is so good, and Adam Thielen is so good as a wide receiver, probably two this year, that Kirk Cousins has come on my draft board as maybe the quarterback that I want to draft in late rounds.
I mean, why wouldn't you? Kirk Cousins had a solid year last year. I mean, poor Kirk Cousins, man. Kirk Cousins has this like stigma that he's so bad at football, but I mean, Kirk Cousins still threw for 4,200 yards. That's a ton of yards. I mean, no, so for reference, no Bears quarterback has ever done that. So I mean, he threw for 4,000, it's 4,200 yards and 35 touchdowns. I would love that on my fantasy football team. Just as a late round flyer, why not, So I think that's interesting. Let's move to the Detroit Lions. Worst team in the NFL, probably.
I don't want anything on this offense.
I don't want a single player on the offense. Not one. I think the offense is going to be so bad. I think Jared Goff is so bad. I know that there was a conversation. Why am I not keeping TJ Hawkinson in the 15th round? I just think it's because the offense is going to be so bad that it doesn't matter that TJ Hawkinson might be okay. Let's rank those offenses 1 to 2, 1 to last. I'll go first. Give me Green Bay. Give me Minnesota, Chicago, Detroit.
Yeah, I'm just going to differ a little bit. I'd go Vikings at number 1. Again, we talked about Justin Jefferson. Yeah, he's incredible. Dalvin Cook's incredible. We know what we're getting with the Vikings the day of this recording. And I think all through training camp, too, there's going to be more questions with Green Bay. I'm going to go Vikings. Then I'd go Green Bay. Again, Davante Adams will be Davante, no matter the quarterback. And then Aaron Jones will be a stud. But I'd still pick Jefferson over Davante this year.
I was about to ask that.
That's my hot take.
That's a hot take. So why? I'll give you a reason why I would give Justin Jefferson over Davante Adams. I want to hear your reason first, though.
Yeah, I just think Jefferson has more of a ceiling. Davante, you're drafting in the first round for him to be that wide receiver 1. When in the second round, you could get the guy who's going to score just as many points, if not more, for a later value.
So here's the reason I would draft, and it's a totally skewed, odd stat, but I'm sticking to it. So in 2019, the top 5 wide receivers were Michael Thomas, Julio Jones, Chris Godwin, DeAndre Hopkins, and I'm forgetting the 5th right now. I had it written down. Just anyways, 2020, none of those players were top 5 wide receivers again. Not a single one, right? And the year before then, 2018, of the top 5 wide receivers in 2019, only 2 of them finished top 5. So it's interesting that wide receivers vary so much, right? And the difference between a top 5 wide receiver and a top 10 wide receiver is a week-winning thing. So I think Davante Adams, based on that stat alone, probably won't repeat what he did last year, even with him missing 4 games, right? So I agree with you on that one. Give me Justin Jefferson. I think he's so young. He's so talented. It's incredible. And who knows what's going on with Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers. If Aaron Rodgers plays, I would still probably take Justin Jefferson over Davante Adams. I like the hot take, Kevin. I agree with you on that one. Let's move to the NFC West. This is the last division we're going to talk about. This is the Seattle Seahawks, Arizona Cardinals, LA Rams, and San Francisco 49ers. I think this is an interesting division. I think this is the toughest division in football. Kev, what team do you want to start with?
Let's start with the Seattle Seahawks. There's all question marks across all four of these teams, but let's start somewhere with Seattle.
Yeah, so I want to talk about Seattle for a little bit. I thought the Russell Wilson takes were interesting this summer. Everyone was talking about how Russell Wilson wants out of Seattle. I was a DK Metcalf keeper owner, so I was sweating a little bit. It has now come out that Russell Wilson is not leaving. They got the new offensive coordinator. They brought in some weapons to the O-line, and they're attempting to make their defense a little better. All of this kind of leads to success for the offense, in my opinion. I think DK Metcalf has a real shot to finish as wide receiver 1. I think Tyler Lockett's a great wide receiver 2. I think Russell Wilson's a great starting quarterback. And I even think Chris Carson, depending on how your first 2 rounds went, if you're in the 3rd, 4th round looking at Chris Carson, there's definitely worse players to take. What do you think, Kevin?
Yeah, I think the steal, honestly, on Seattle's offense, we all know the impact that those 2 wide receivers make and Russell Wilson. But Chris Carson is getting drafted in the 4th round right now. I think that's a steal with how that offense moves passing the ball. The run game has to open up at some point, and I think Chris Carson is a solid running back. Again, like the Atlanta Falcons, I'd be excited with any player that falls to me on the Seattle Seahawks.
So do you think Chris Carson missing 4 games last year, not really having like a defined running purpose? So last year in 12 games, Chris Carson only ran the ball 141 times, right? The year before, in 15 games, he ran the ball 278 times. So that's almost twice as much with only 3 games more. Which one do you think is like, do you think it'll be more like 2019 or do you think it'll be more like 2020 where they're just going to throw the ball nonstop?
I think 2019, because if you were watching the Seattle Seahawks late into the season, their defense started to pick up. They were throwing the ball so much last year because their defense could not come together. But we have to remember what defensive players are still on the Seahawks. They have some big time superstars on that team. Chris Carson is definitely going to run it more than last year. He's being drafted at his floor right now.
I was about to say that. It seems like Chris Carson's being drafted at his floor, and even with him having so few rushing yards, he was still a touchdown machine. He had 9 total touchdowns last year, and he had over 1,000 all-purpose yards with receiving. So I mean, last year his floor is 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns, right? So that's not terrible. So I would take that on my team. Let's look at Chris Carson's ADP. We kind of touched on this. There are guys around him, are the J.K. Dobbins, the Josh Jacobs, the Chris Carsons, the David Montgomerys. Those are some of the running backs being taken around him. Do you like Chris Carson more than all those running backs, or do you like him? Where do you rank him in those 4 running backs?
I would say I like him just in the mix of those running backs. Just because you don't know what year you're getting. As much as I want to say you're getting the 2019 Chris Carson, you just don't know. But Josh Jacobs and J.K. Dobbins actually look like they're getting drafted a little bit before Chris Carson by about a half a round. So if I'm just later in that round, I'll be happy to take Chris Carson and have him fall to me. But I'm not going to reach for any of those 4 running backs.
It's a good point. Let's go ahead and move on a little bit from a different team. Let's go to the Arizona Cardinals. They had a ton of offseason moves that I think really benefit Kyler Murray. One of those offseason moves is being signing James Conner at the running back. They signed Ronnie Hudson. They traded for him with the Oakland Raiders, the rundown center, and as well as AJ Green. So here's some interesting stats with Ronnie Hudson and AJ Green. Last year, the Arizona Cardinals handed the ball off to Kenyon Drake, got him 12 rushing touchdowns up the middle. Their run blocking center was PFF ranked 30th. Ronnie Hudson last year was a top 10 PFF ranked. This is a tough sentence to say. Was a top 10 ranked PFF blocking center, right? So I think that's a huge addition. James Conner, his injury concerns are there. I think that's interesting. And here's an interesting stat with AJ Green. AJ Green last year was thrown the lowest percentage of catchable balls. I think that's interesting with Kyler Murray. He's such a physical specimen. I think he might sneak into that red zone target goal. He might break out this year with 800 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns. I think that's a very possible stat line for AJ Green. I think the moon is the ceiling for Kyler Murray. I think Kyler Murray is probably going to end up being the quarterback 1. It's interesting. Last year he had his breakout sophomore season, then hurt his shoulder week 12. Ever since then, he was just never really the same. If he comes back fully healthy, I think the Arizona Cardinals might have the most interesting offense in the NFL. I hate Cliff Kingsbury, but let's not get into that. Kevin, what do you think about this offense?
Yeah, Kyler Murray, lock it in. Top 3 quarterback for fantasy football this year, right behind Patrick Mahomes. And then Josh Allen, I think he beats out even Lamar Jackson for that top 3 spot, though. When
So,
it,
do you
when it,
think Kyler will have a better season than Dak Prescott at fantasy football quarterback?
absolutely.
You think so?
Yeah, with the way that he runs the ball, he's got better weapons. I'll take DeAndre Hopkins. I'll take the rookie flyer. I'll take AJ Green over, what the Dallas Cowboys have in 1 and 2.
Okay. I don't disagree. Do you think AJ Green takes away from DeAndre Hopkins, kind of makes DeAndre Hopkins worse, or do you think he just complements DeAndre Hopkins?
I think if anything, DeAndre Hopkins will get more open within that offense now. He might even have a bigger season, if not the same.
I agree. Who do you think the starting running back is on this Cardinals offense? Do you think it's James Conner or do you think it's Chase Edmonds?
I don't think there's a starting running back here. I think James Conner takes the ball down to the red zone, and then I think they put in Chase Edmonds on some little wheel routes and punch the ball in. I'm not too excited about either of these running backs. If we look at James Conner last year with the offense in the Pittsburgh Steelers, who had a similar offensive line, obviously the Steelers' offensive line is not similar today, but a pretty good one. James Conner with 6 touchdowns only. That's not a guy that I want, especially when you have Chase Edmonds on that team.
Well, sure, but I mean that's kind of Big Ben not trusting James Conner, which I mean maybe could be a telling tale for James Conner, right? But I mean I don't know. At James Conner's ADP, it's 183. So a couple running backs around him: David Johnson, Kenyon Drake, wide receivers being Jalen Rager and Mike Williams. I mean 183. That's that's pretty late in the draft. That's 8th round, right? No, that's way late in the draft. That's way later than. So I mean that's you're taking a super late flyer on James Conner. I could see a world where if James Conner stays healthy, James Conner could be the goal line back for this offense, much like Kenyon Drake was. And Kenyon Drake finished last year as running back 12. I don't know if running back 12 is possible for James Conner, but I mean, I could see James Conner punching in the ball a whole lot, maybe a flex throw, hoping he gets in the end zone, kind of like I did with Kenyon Drake last year. I don't hate the prospect. I think it's interesting. I mean, it's you don't often see running backs have such good seasons like James Conner have. And then his offensive line, so James Conner's rookie year was so good, and his offensive line ever since then just was worse and worse and worse, and he got hurt. So it's kind of a weird combination in Pittsburgh. I don't know if that's totally James Conner's fault. I'd be intrigued taking a late line flyer on James Conner, and hell, even give me a late line flyer on Chase Edmonds. I think they handcuff each other. I mean, if one of those guys gets hurt, the next guy could be a top 5 running back the next week, right? So I think that's interesting. I think that's enough on the Arizona Cardinals. Let's talk about the San Francisco 49ers. I think they had a huge offseason this offseason. They got a ton of guys come back from injury. They drafted Trey Lance 3rd overall. Jimmy Garoppolo has apparently come back this training camp. He looks incredible according to his teammates. I don't know what it's all about. How do you rank the 49ers? What do you think about the 49ers? You see their players. I think their running back committee is a disaster. I think the only player I really want on this team is probably George Kittle. What do you think?
Yeah, George Kittle's the guy that I want. I'd also look at Brandon Ayuk. He's a pretty good wide receiver. We saw some flashes of him last year.
Sure.
Could make a jump this year. I'm not too sold on the quarterback, even though I'm looking at the wide receiver and definitely the tight end. When it comes to the running backs, I might just pick up one late in the season off the waiver wire
Right.
and hope that somebody else is going to take the carries the next week if I'm looking for a playoff push
Right.
or to avoid losing the league.
Right. So Jeff Wilson's already out the first 6 weeks. So week 6, we're adding Jeff Wilson into the fold. Raheem Mostert, he always seems like he wants to be good, but then he always gets hurt. So no one really knows what's going on with Raheem Mostert. And then they drafted that rookie running back Trey Sermon out of Oklahoma. He's got a lot of love. They're saying he looks great in the offseason. I don't know. And then your point to Brandon Ayuk, I agree, but I think it completely depends on who the quarterback is. I think if it's Trey Lance, that benefits Brandon Ayuk. If it's Jimmy Garoppolo, it benefits Deebo Samuel. And I don't know if you're going to be able to tell which quarterback's going to start because it seems like the 49ers obviously want Trey Lance to start, but Jimmy Garoppolo took you to the Super Bowl. If Jimmy Garoppolo's looking great this training camp, we got to figure it out, right? And then also Deebo Samuel's average depth of catch is like -3 yards because he's getting them in sweeping motions and stuff like that out of the shotgun. If Trey Lance is the quarterback, I think that kind of stops. If Jimmy Garoppolo is the quarterback, I think that keeps going. I'd rather have Debo Samuel over Brandon Ayuk in that situation. Last team of the podcast, we got the LA Rams. Biggest offseason acquisition was Matt Stafford. Everyone's talking about how good Matt Stafford is, Matt Stafford this, Matt Stafford that, whatever. I'm over the hype. I don't know if Matt Stafford's as good as everyone thinks he is. Obviously, he's a top 10 quarterback, but I don't think he's the Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray echelon. I think he's more like Ryan Tannehill and Matt Ryan. That's just me, though. What are your thoughts of the LA Rams? Obviously, they have a superstar studded defense. They got Jalen Ramsey, Aaron Donald on the defense. It's a top 5 defense for fantasy, but no one really wants to talk about defense on fantasy defenses, unfortunately. So, Kev, what do you think of their offense?
Yeah, when it comes to the offense, I was talking about fantasy gold as being consistent. That's exactly what Matt Stafford is. I mean, he's good for 4,000 yards and 25 to 30 touchdowns each year and about 8 to 10 interceptions. Look at his last, 7 years in the league. That's exactly what he throws for each and every year. So when you keep that in mind, you're going to want probably one of the wide receivers on this team, either Robert Woods or Cooper Kupp. I would lean Cooper Kupp just because I see him involved in that offense more. The head coach loves Cooper Kupp, loves getting him involved. So that's the guy that I'm looking for here. I'm not too interested in Tyler Higbee. Robert Woods, again, is more that deep threat. I don't know if I'm too interested in him because their defense and run game is so good. So Robert Woods falls a little bit below Cooper Kupp, which is interesting because Cooper Kupp is actually getting drafted later than Robert Woods this year.
How high is Cam Akers' ceiling to you?
Where he's being drafted.
You don't think he'll be better than, what is he, running back 11? You don't think he'll crack into that top 10?
I just don't think he cracks into the top 5 of running backs. We do have some wide receivers in that first round and a tight end. So I think Cam Akers is being drafted at a ceiling. Great player, but you got to remember that Darrell Henderson is there, and he's a big back. He's not great. He's not as good as Cam Akers, but Cam Akers is a small guy who probably can't run every down. They're going to throw in Darrell Henderson. They'll probably throw him in around the goal line.
Yeah, so Cam Akers feels like those running backs that you'll draft. He feels like, so to me, Antonio Gibson and Cam Akers kind of feel like Kenyon Drake and Joe Mixon of last year. They were on that turn. They were about to take that jump. People were high on them if everything went to plan, right? And then obviously Joe Mixon and Kenyon Drake, neither one of those guys really finished high. I think that Antonio Gibson and Cam Akers obviously could. Yes, I think both. I think there is a route to where both Antonio Gibson and Cam Akers finish as top 5 running backs. I really do. I think they're both ultra talented. I think Antonio Gibson's in such a good scenario with Ron Rivera being his head coach. Christian McCaffrey, I'm not saying he's as talented as Christian McCaffrey, but Antonio Gibson was a wide receiver in college, and that was 2 years ago. Ron Rivera said he saw him, he loved him, he wanted him at running back. So I think that's interesting. And then Cam Akers, it's really interesting because last year, Sean McVay in the offseason was talking about how he's going to use all 3 running backs of Malcolm Brown, Darrell Henderson, and Cam Akers. And that was what he was saying all last offseason, right? And then the start of the season, that's what it was. And then all of a sudden, week 12 hit, and they just started feeding the ball to Cam Akers. And all of a sudden, Malcolm Brown and Darrell Henderson were just this afterthought, right? And I think that was Sean McVay wanting to, A, give Cam Akers some time because you don't want to throw a rookie running back in there. And B, they really saw that Cam Akers was the most talented running back. I really think that's what happened. And in this offseason, Sean McVay said, I don't think there's anything that Cam Akers can't do. So, I mean, I think that's incredible. If I'm pick 10 and Antonio Gibson and Cam Akers are both sitting there, whew, I mean,
Here's a stat for you, Ross. Okay, so you said after week 12 they're giving it to Cam Akers, which they were. Cam Akers ran the ball 145 times, 625 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Darrell Henderson, who didn't get the ball a lot after week 12, had 135 attempts, 10 less than Cam Akers, rushed for 624 yards, 1 less than Cam Akers, and scored 5 touchdowns. Malcolm Brown, 101 attempts, 420 yards, and 5 touchdowns.
Yeah, the Malcolm Brown with the 5 touchdowns. That's a real kick to the nads. I'm not gonna lie. Malcolm Brown's not there anymore. He's on the
Right,
Dolphins
but
now.
Daryl Henderson is with those 5 touchdowns as well compared to
That's
Cam
true.
Akers too.
That's true. Cam Akers did not score a lot of touchdowns last year, but like I said, Sean McVay is just really pumping his tires. I said there's a route that I could see where Cam Akers is top 5. I'm not, but so it is interesting. Let's rank these offenses 1 through 4 in this division. I'll go first. Give me Seattle, give me Arizona, give me the Rams, and then give me 49ers. What are your thoughts?
I'm going to go with Seattle just because Russell Wilson and that wide receiver core. Again, the
Right.
running back's better than a lot of people are drafting them at. Then I'm going to go with the Rams there. I think the run game opens up a little bit more with Matt Stafford and not Jared Goff. If we were shitting on Jared Goff earlier, we got to consider the Rams here.
Right.
And then we're going to go with the Arizona Cardinals, finishing off with the 49ers. 49ers just have too many question marks. The only solidified position is tight end.
Yeah, so for me, the only reason that I would want the Arizona over the Rams is because I think Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins are a better 1-2 punch than anyone that the Rams has. I think the Rams have just a lot of question marks right now with Matt Stafford. Like I said, I'm high on Cam. Obviously, I want whichever wide receiver is going to be that wide receiver 1 on the Rams. I want them. Like you said, Robert Woods is more the deep passing guy, and Cooper Kupp's more the over middle guy. I don't know who's going to be the number 1 wide receiver there. Whichever one it is has immense fantasy value. Kevin, we are 2 minutes over an hour. I think this was a great first episode. I think we're going to do this about once a week, guys. Any questions, comments, concerns, tweet us, Facebook us, message us, text us, whatever you want to do. We're going to be posting this on Spotify, our website, and many other places. Kevin's got a Twitter he's going to be tweeting this from. A lot of places to listen to it too. Love the fans. We love fantasy football. What'd you say, Kevin? 54 days till draft day?
We're at 56 days till draft day.
50
Let's get ready to roll.
Let's get ready to roll. Let's listen to this podcast once a week, guys. We love you guys. Let's have ourselves a day. Kevin, any comments before we leave?
I'll talk to you later.
Talk to you later, boys. Everyone have a good day.